I think he's ultimately, or he began as ultimately a very hollow person.
When David Frum enters the arena, he doesn't yell or grandstand. He simply dissects you with the precision of a surgeon and the calm of someone who's already read the ending. His latest sparring partner? Vice President JD Vance? The same Vance who once positioned himself as the voice of forgotten Appalachia now seems to have forgotten how logic works. Watching Frum take him apart is like watching a debate between a chess grandmaster and a guy who just discovered checkers. Frum literally just called him a very hollow person.
He actually used to write for an old website of yours. So can you tell me how you viewed him then and how you view him today? Is he still the same person that you knew then?
He's a man of extraordinary moral and intellectual flexibility, to put it mildly. He has changed his mind on many issues, and the stories he tells about why he's changed his mind are not true, or at least they don't line up with the dates. For example, that he says the reason he is so in favor of betraying Ukraine now is because of his disillusionment with the Iraq War. Well, he was writing for me half a decade after he came back from military service. And he was then an advocate of traditional American global leadership.
David Frum doesn't need theatrics. He simply lines up the facts like dominoes and flicks them over with one quiet, devastating sentence. On CNN, when asked about his former protégé, JD Vance, Frum didn't flinch. He described Vance as a man of extraordinary moral and intellectual flexibility. A polite way of saying the man bends like a yoga instructor in a wind tunnel. He calmly rejected all of Vance's excuses. In other words, JD didn't just flip the script, he rewrote the whole play and hoped no one remembered the original.
What can we do about lowering the cost of daycare? Hayden, obviously a working family, and it's very hard for working families to get by. How will we lower the cost of daycare?
You know, such an important question, Charlie. And I think one of the things that we can do is make it easier for family models to choose, or for families to choose whatever model they want, right? So one of the ways that you might be able to relieve a little bit of pressure on people who are paying so much for daycare is make it so that you know, maybe like grandma or grandpa wants to help out a little bit more. Or maybe there's an aunt or uncle that wants to help out a little bit more. If that happens, you relieve some of the pressure on all the resources that we're spending in daycare. Now, you talk about just daycare. Let's say you don't have somebody who can provide that extra set of hands. What we've got to do is actually empower people to get trained in the skills that they need for the 21st century.
JD Vance recently took a break from cosplaying as the voice of the forgotten American to drop this gem. Instead of making childcare more affordable, maybe grandma can just watch the kids. Brilliant. Who needs policy when you've got vague nostalgia and unpaid labor? Before we go further, make sure to like the video, hit subscribe, and comment below if your grandma's ever been drafted into full-time childcare by a USA senator. Now you'd think he might come prepared, but no. Instead, we got the "what if grandma just watched your kid" approach to policy. He thought, hope your retired relatives are free and up for the job. Oh, and maybe your uncle too, because every toddler wants to spend the afternoon with Uncle Dave, who's been unemployed since 2012. And then came David Frum on the Bulwark podcast to kindly dismantle JD's attempt at seriousness. Ever the composed assassin, Frum pointed out the obvious. Vance almost said something useful. He was this close to endorsing a tax credit proposal that would help informal caregivers like grandparents offset the costs of childcare. But alas, JD flinched. Why? Because acknowledging that would mean suggesting the government actually do something. And we can't have that. So instead of advocating for a real, existing idea, Vance wrapped himself in culture war fluff, talking vaguely about different family models, as if that somehow pays the bills. Frum just calmly explained that the JD sounded like someone who read half a memo, panicked, and bailed mid-thought. The guy won't even back a policy that already exists because that might sound too helpful.
You could see there was he's read an article, and because there are proposals of this, there's proposals. What if there were a refundable tax credit for childcare that you could give to a family member? And that's an idea. I haven't thought about it enough to know whether it's a good idea or bad, but that's an idea and people have written it. Yeah. And so he's got that on the tip of his tongue, but he also understands, wait a minute, that means spending money. Yeah. And that's going to be a no-go area for some of the people who are listening. So what he makes it sound like is that he's got an idea, but he doesn't quite dare say it. and then he hastily skeeters on.
What we witnessed was peak JD Vance. Performative, allergic to detail, and terrified of suggesting the government lift a finger for working families. And Frum? He dismantled Vance's argument like someone peeling a rotten banana, slowly, methodically, and with just enough disgust to let you know this wasn't his first time dealing with squishy nonsense dressed up as strategy. If JD Vance ever gets a statue, it should come with a warning label. Contents may shift depending on political winds. Because the man's performance in the VIP debate wasn't just a flip-flop, 1 minute he's against abortion, the next he's gaslighting America about ever supporting a national ban, and then there's healthcare. Vance acted like Trump was the guardian angel of Obamacare, conveniently forgetting the part where Trump tried to kill it more times than a Friday the 13th villain. David Frum didn't bother with theatrics. He came in with the quiet confidence of someone who's watched guys like JD Vance try to cosplay as serious statesmen for years. No shouting, no drama. Just facts sharp enough to slice through the fog of nonsense Vance wrapped himself in. While JD spent the debate playing political dress-up, switching personas faster than a TikTok filter, Frum laid out the receipts. He called out the lies, the abortion ban. Vance pretended he never championed, claiming Trump saved Obamacare when he actually tried to kill it. He kept pushing the idea that Biden ruined the economy, even though jobs are up, unemployment is low, and the stock market is booming. Frum didn't stop at policy. He went for the core issue, which is actually Vance. Not the guy who debates federal land with polished answers, but the one who's been wading knee-deep in conspiracy sludge and far-right fever dreams for the past few years. The guy who shapeshifted into Trump's ideal running mate. Frum didn't roast him, he exposed him. And in doing so, reminded viewers that behind JD's polished debate persona is a man willing to say anything, believe anything, and be anything, as long as it gets him closer to the power seat.
I've known JD Vance for 15 years, and in that time, I've seen him play many different roles, and I've heard him tell many different and contradictory stories about who he is and what he believes. So last night, he debuted a new role and a new story. And that created a problem for the moderators because it's CBS, the most prestigious name in television news. Obviously, they're not going to ask questions about George Soros's plot to replace the white race. They're not going to ask questions about, is Tim Walz plotting to turn all the boys of Minnesota into trans? They're not going to ask about Putinism and why you repeat Putin propaganda. They're going to ask serious, substantive questions about the issues. The problem is, the reason JD Vance is on the Republican ticket in the first place, yes, he went along with, made it clear he was going to go along with coups against the Constitution, but he also has been trafficking in the filthiest muck of American politics on right-wing podcasts, on obscure places for the past 4 years as he reinvented himself to please Donald Trump.
In The Atlantic, David Frum didn't just critique JD Vance's debate performance, he exposed it. Vance, Frum notes, wasn't showing America who he really is. He was unveiling his latest political disguise. One moment, Vance sounded like a policy wonk ready to govern. The next, he echoed the kind of rhetoric usually reserved for fringe podcasts. Frum, who's watched Vance evolve over the years, called it what it was: another calculated reinvention. When foreign policy came up, particularly U.S. support for Israel, Vance danced around specifics, offering a carefully sanitized version of himself. But as Frum reminds in The Atlantic, that polished version is a far cry from the Vance who has spent the past few years cozying up to conspiracy theorists and pushing anti-democratic narratives in Trumpist echo chambers. Frum's piece lays out how Vance's entire debate performance was a performance, built to impress a national audience while conveniently erasing his actual record. He may have suited up for CBS, but underneath the surface, he's still the same guy who's been parroting Putin propaganda and railing against American institutions on far-right platforms. According to Frum, the debate didn't reveal a leader, it exposed a well-rehearsed circus. During an interview with Ailsa Chang, David Frum didn't hold back, and honestly, bless him for it. He broke down JD Vance's transformation with the finesse of a therapist watching a midlife crisis in real time. According to Frum, Vance isn't some master manipulator playing 4D chess. Nope, it's not that complicated. Frum says people usually make their thoughts and words match, even if it ends up sounding a bit off. So when Vance called Trump reprehensible and America's Hitler in 2016, he probably meant it. Just like now when he suddenly swears undying MAGA loyalty, he probably means that too. It's not conviction, it's just whatever fits today's vibes. Frum doesn't believe Vance is just a Trump copy. He sees him more like a MAGA hologram, flashy, a bit unstable, and only loyal while Trump stays powerful. The moment Trump slips, Vance will disappear like a bad Tinder date. So, no, he's not a clone. He's more like a weather vane in khakis, turning whichever way the political wind blows. When asked if Vance has any limits, Frum didn't hesitate. He basically said, yeah, he did, and then he stepped right over it. Frum's point is simple. Back in the day, Vance had strong words about Trump, but now he is standing right beside him. It's not that Vance doesn't have a line, it's that he already decided Trump was the limit and then ignored it completely. So, if you're wondering how far Vance is willing to go, Frum's answer is clear. The man's already gone further than he once thought he ever would. David Frum recently shared a hilarious yet telling observation. Oof. Imagine being the GOP's VP pick and Twitter's full-time keyboard warrior. Frum didn't even seem that flattered. In fact, he quipped that having Vance as your own personal reply guy isn't exactly a brag-worthy milestone. It's just a regular Tuesday on the internet. But here's the real question Frum raises. How does a man running for the second highest office in the land have this much time to troll online? Shouldn't he be, running a campaign, meeting voters, reading briefs? Instead, Vance seems to be moonlighting as Twitter's most loyal defender of Trump, one tweet at a time. This isn't just about social media addiction, it's about priorities. If your VP candidate is more active in the comments section than at campaign stops, what does that say about the campaign's focus, or worse, the candidate's temperament? As Frum slyly suggests, maybe Vance should spend less time replying to tweets and more time preparing to lead a country. When it comes to talking about family, JD Vance could have taken the high road, the kind that doesn't come with a side of culture war. But nope, instead of making people feel seen, he chose to stir the pot and go full political performance mode. David Frum, as usual, cut right through the noise. He pointed out that Vance had the perfect chance to sound human, grounded, and maybe even relatable. But that kind of calm, reasonable talk doesn't really get you trending. Instead, Vance seems more focused on stirring up drama than actually helping people. Why offer thoughtful solutions when you can just yell about childless women and ride the algorithm? It's the difference between someone trying to solve a real issue like declining birth rates and strained families, and someone just throwing social grenades for likes, shares, and airtime. Frum's take didn't just highlight the missed opportunity, it quietly asked why someone running for VP spends more time picking fights online than building trust offline.
He wouldn't have become the social media red-hot superstar he did, but if he constantly said, I've become a father, it's the greatest source of joy in my life. It is my wife and I together have discovered new sources of meaning. I want to make this experience more available to more people. We've been very fortunate, so it's easy for us to afford it. I recognize it's expensive. Not everyone is going to have all the children they want, but we want to help as many people as they can to have as many of them. Again, that would not excite the audience for the Steve Bannon radio show. It wouldn't get Tucker Carlson inflamed. But it would make you sound like a kind of trustworthy person on this issue, especially to the women you're asking to bear the children.
Now that JD Vance is vice president, you'd think he'd focus on, being vice president. But nope, it seems like he's still more interested in picking fights, chasing headlines, and acting like Twitter is his second office. The man stays busy, just not with policy. Whether it's lecturing allies or delivering dramatic one-liners about culture wars, JD keeps reminding us he's here for the spotlight, not the substance. JD Vance always keeps us guessing. One day he's against Trump. The next, he's his running mate. His views change so often, it's hard to keep up, but at least it's never boring. And with that, we're wrapping up. If this had you raising your eyebrows and laughing along, you'll definitely enjoy our video on Ron Howard and Vance. Stay tuned, it only gets spicier from here.